After losing her job in tears, a billionaire's amazing offer unveiled an unexpected new beginning. Sarah Miller stared blankly at the HR representative, her heart racing as he outlined the grim reality of budget cuts, her position as a nurse eliminated. The meeting blurred into a distorted hum, the weight of her passion and dedication crushed under corporate jargon. Tears pooled in her eyes, not just for the job she had devoted herself to, but for the security of her two young children. How would she tell them their mother, who fought so hard, had lost her role in a world that seemed to prioritize profits over people? The drive home was a twisted loop of memories. Late nights spent poring over nursing textbooks, the constant struggle to balance work and motherhood, all dreams stitched together in the hope of giving her kids a better life. Now all of it felt like shreds of paper caught in the winds of uncertainty. Pulling into her driveway, she caught sight of her children playing in the yard. Do they sense the change? Her stomach churned as she wished she could shield them from her despair. A few hours later, she found herself at a community charity event, her hands trembling as she served meals. That's when she met Thomas Reed. The billionaire's presence was almost magnetic, his demeanor unruffled, his eyes shadowed by something deeper. Though she felt like a moth drawn to flame, she questioned what a man like him would know about the struggle she had just faced. Their conversation felt significant, an unexpected connection sparking amidst the chaos around them. He asked about her nursing career, and, while he listened carefully, something in his expression resonated with her years of hardship. But when Thomas extended an offer to lead a new health initiative, everything shifted. A whirlwind of conflicting emotions engulfed her. The abruptness of it hit her like a freight train. Accept this offer? Partner with a billionaire who existed in another stratosphere? The very thought felt like a betrayal to her heart and her identity. Would taking his help signify failure? In her gut, she felt the uncertainty twist tighter and tighter. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The more she discussed the initiative with Thomas, the more the tension between ambition and loyalty tore at her. Could she follow this new path and still be true to herself? Conversations with family led to doubts flipping over in her mind, their raised eyebrows implying mistrust, their worry wrapping around her like barbed wire. Community leaders questioned her dedication, and all she could do was stand frozen, trying to prove her worth to the world she thought she belonged to. As the initiative began to take shape, challenges mounted. Sarah felt the walls closing in. Friends and relatives whispered concerns, framing her decision as a betrayal of her roots. Caught in her own internal storm, clenching her fists and fighting for air, she found herself spiraling. Would this partnership with Thomas create the program she envisioned, or tear apart the community she cared about, its authenticity at risk? Each passing moment heightened the conflict within her, raising stakes she hadn't even realized existed. With every step toward the unknown, the question echoed louder. Could she rise to the occasion and make a difference, or were her efforts doomed to fail before they even began? As every moment drew her deeper into uncertainty, Sarah clung to the fragile hope embedded in her heart. The passion she had spent years cultivating smoldered beneath the surface, but was it enough to overcome the enormous pressure weighing down on her? Every choice felt monumental, each heartbeat measuring the space between her dreams and reality. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to clear her mind. The weight of her decision felt heavier with each passing day. The initiative had potential to reshape healthcare for many, yet every time she imagined herself at the helm, a tight knot of doubt twisted in her gut. She had dedicated years to nursing, building relationships with patients who relied on her, not just for medicine, but for comfort and compassion. Could she honestly reconcile that oath with a project funded by someone so detached from the realities of daily life? She sat at her kitchen table, the faint sounds of her children playing drifting in from outside, punctuated by the occasional laughter. They were oblivious to their mother's turmoil, and the thought made her heart ache. Their innocence was a stark contrast to the churning doubts that clouded her thoughts. Could accepting Thomas's offer truly help ensure their future, or would it only pull her further into a world she struggled to navigate? As days turned into weeks, Sarah learned more about the initiative. Thomas had assembled a team of experts and advisors, but his casual confidence often overshadowed her contributions. At meetings, his presence loomed over hers, infusing the air with an intimidating energy. She felt her voice falter, slipping into the background as the titan of industry articulated grand visions layered over her own ideas. It was frustrating. Moments of insight surged from her experience, only to be swept away by plans she couldn't connect with. Determined to reclaim her voice, Sarah took an unconventional route. One evening, she arranged a small gathering with a few colleagues, inviting them to provide feedback on her ideas in a more relaxed setting. The warmth of familiarity enveloped her as she shared her vision, and for the first time in weeks, a spark ignited. They bounced ideas back and forth, augmenting her original thoughts with their expertise. It felt good to collaborate, to remember her foundational ideals in healthcare. But as the brainstorming session drew to a close, an unsettling realization settled over Sarah. She had neglected the community's needs. In the face of rising ambition, she had omitted the voices of those she wanted to help. She excused herself from the table, her thoughts racing. Had her aspirations led her to overlook the very essence of nursing? That night, as Sarah lay in bed, the shadows of her fears danced on the walls. She decided she needed a direct conversation with Thomas, a confrontation that could shift the balance of power. The thought energized her, reshaping her uncertainty into a focused resolve. But doubt nipped at her heels. What if he dismissed her concerns? Yet all she needed was the courage to voice her thoughts, however scary that may be. The following week, as they prepared for another meeting, Sarah rehearsed her words countless times in her head. Her heart thudded in her chest, the fear of vulnerability looming large. This moment could determine not only her future, but the future of the very initiative she was coming to see as critical. As she stood at the entrance of the conference room, she caught a glimpse of Thomas, animatedly discussing strategic plans with others. For a fleeting moment, memories of her past in nursing washed over her, reminders of why she entered the field. To make a difference in the lives of her patients. The moment had come to compile both her insights and her spirit into a singular message. Could she turn the tide and make her voice resonate as strongly as his? And would she find the strength to speak her truth, regardless of the consequences? Her breath hitched as she walked toward the group, the gravity of her decision coiling tightly around her. Would this opportunity lead to empowerment or personal ruin? The stakes felt monumental, her fate entwined with the broader vision laid out before her. As a new wave of determination surged through Sarah, she prepared to confront not just Thomas, but the embodiment of her fears. The pivotal moment was upon her, a course set toward a resolution that loomed just ahead. What awaited her on the other side would define more than just her professional path. It could redefine who she was at her core. As Sarah stepped into the conference room, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Colleagues turned, their conversations dying down as they sensed her presence. She felt the weight of their gazes, judgment mingling with curiosity. Pushing aside her nerves, she planted her feet firmly, grounding herself in the belief that she had something to contribute. Thomas, noticing her arrival, turned his attention toward her. There was a flicker of surprise in his eyes, perhaps even a hint of annoyance at being interrupted. It fueled her resolve. She had rehearsed her words, but this moment demanded more than a script. It required genuine connection. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" she said, her voice steady despite the flutter in her stomach. Heads turned, and the murmurs quieted. "I appreciate everyone's hard work and dedication to this initiative. I've valued our discussions, and I've been reflecting on the direction we're heading," she began, her pulse racing. "But I think we've overlooked something fundamental: our patients' voices. We need to prioritize their needs and experiences if we're going to reshape healthcare." A pause ensued, the air thick with uncertainty. She noticed Thomas frowning slightly, his eyes narrowing in concentration. "Sarah, I think we've discussed the importance of that already," he interjected, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely open to her input. "Our focus now should be on market evaluation and expansion strategies." "I agree with those points," she countered, her voice gaining new strength. "But how can we innovate if we ignore the realities faced by those we aim to serve? Without their insight, we're missing a crucial element." For a moment, Sarah feared her voice wouldn't carry. What if they all dismissed her perspective as just another emotional outburst? But the determination ignited within her refused to be snuffed out. "Imagine if our approach directly reflected the concerns and needs of actual patients," she continued, drawing in a deep breath, her vision sharpening. "We could conduct community surveys or focus groups. If we're serious about making a difference, we need to create a connection that goes beyond business metrics." Thomas's expression shifted, a flicker of interest igniting within his stoic demeanor. He leaned back in his chair, contemplating her passion. The room remained silent, as if collectively holding its breath, waiting. "I see your point, Sarah," he finally said, a grudging respect evident in his gaze. "Your background gives you a unique perspective on the need for empathy in our plans. I think we should follow up on this." Relief washed over her, but it was tinged with caution. Had she truly penetrated the armor around Thomas's ambition? She knew this moment wouldn't erase the initial intimidation he exuded, nor would it be the end of her doubts. But she had spoken up, challenged him in a way she hadn't thought possible. As the meeting transitioned to logistics and future plans, Sarah felt invigorated but still apprehensive. The encounter complete, yet far from resolved. She had taken a decisive step forward, yet the battle between her personal convictions and the corporate machinery was just beginning. A newfound clarity settled in her mind. She realized that navigating this landscape wouldn't be solely about voicing her thoughts, but strategically weaving her values into the fabric of their initiative. Perhaps she could find a way to align her vision with the program's goals. The thought invigorated her, blending hope with strategy. But in the back of her mind, fragments of doubt remained. Was she truly prepared to commit fully, risking it all for an initiative that could as easily be co-opted by corporate interests? Determined to stay anchored, Sarah left the meeting with renewed vigor, yet a gnawing uncertainty lingered. She sensed that this was a vital juncture, but a confrontation loomed ahead, one that could test her limits and redefine her role. The more she delved into the initiative, the clearer it became. She had to embrace not only the potential for innovation, but also the stark reality of risks involved. How would she navigate the storm ahead? As soon as she reached home, the blend of exhilaration and trepidation coursed through her. The stakes were high, but so were the opportunities. Would she rise to the occasion, or would fear once again pull her under? In that moment, Sarah knew. The real work had just begun, and the next challenge was on the horizon, requiring her to confront both Thomas and the very essence of the initiative she was passionate about. The following day dawned, brisk and overcast. Sarah's mind whirled as she prepped for her next meeting with the project team, a heady blend of anticipation and dread saturating her thoughts. As she entered the conference room, the air felt heavier than before. Thomas had agreed to consider her ideas, but that small victory came at the cost of heightened scrutiny. Every pair of eyes seemed to dissect her motives, assessing whether she truly belonged in this high-stakes arena. She took her seat, unfolding her notes, determination coursing through her veins. Yet doubt crawled at the edges of her confidence. Was she becoming an obstacle or a voice of reason? Would her emphasis on patient-centric strategies lead to the advancement of their initiative, or would it merely act as an annoying refrain in the chorus of corporate goals? The meeting commenced, and chatter echoed around the table as colleagues presented data and projections. Sarah stayed silent initially, listening intently. Her instinct to contribute tugged at her, demanding release. In a world dominated by metrics, how could she effectively channel her vision without appearing naive? Finally, frustration bubbled over as discussions drifted away from genuine patient concerns. "Could we pause for a moment?" she interjected, her voice steady but firm, interrupting the flow of conversation. "I know metrics matter, but at what point do we stop talking about numbers and start talking about people? There's a disconnect." Her words hung in the air, jangling against the rigid structure of their conversation. Thomas turned to face her, a glint of irritation flashing across his face. "Sarah, we have a plan, and it's grounded in market realities," he countered sharply. But she could feel the tension shift slightly, indicating an openness lurking just beneath his professionalism. "What if we use those metrics to understand the patients better?" she suggested, her pulse racing. "We can still discuss expansion and revenue, but without understanding who we serve, our progress will be superficial. Not every decision can be data-driven. We need narratives, not just numbers." His brow furrowed, eyes narrowing in contemplation. In that moment, Sarah sensed a flicker of intrigue, however slight. It was as if he was weighing her words against his own principles. Could he allow himself to consider that there might be a merit in prioritizing human experience over pure financial gain? As discussions ensued, Sarah found herself weaving a careful tapestry of stories. Drawing from her past experiences, she shared anecdotes about patients whose lives had been changed through consistent care. The room finally began to focus, slightly tethering itself to her perspective. She felt emboldened, as if each story listed a page in an unwritten narrative about why their work mattered. But before she could bask in the small victory, Thomas leaned forward, breaking the momentary reverie. "You raise valid points, Sarah, But we also risk our position in the market if we divert our attention too much. We can't afford to make decisions based solely on emotion. We can create a framework that captures patient feedback alongside our projections, Sarah replied, clinging to her resolve. I'm not suggesting we abandon data. I'm just advocating for a balance. Silence enveloped the room again. Sarah turned inward, grappling with thoughts of risk. Could this insistence on patient advocacy jeopardize her career? She was no longer merely proposing an idea. She was positioning herself at odds with Thomas's vision. The consequence struck her. If she didn't navigate this seamlessly, she might find herself unceremoniously ousted from both the project and the company. Yet deep within, the passion for innovation and meaningful change surged. It wasn't just about her professional ascension. It was about contributing to something far greater than herself. When the meeting ended, there was a palpable shift. Not everyone was convinced, but the seeds of her vision had been planted. As she stepped out, the tension ebbed, but uncertainty remained. Would she continue to rise or be swept back into the shadows of corporate apathy? The next challenge loomed, a meeting with Thomas alone, where he would express his perspective. Would she buckle under pressure, or would she stand firm against the winds of corporate ambition? Her heart hammered in anticipation of what lay ahead. The next day, the anticipation clung to Sarah like the persistent humidity of early summer. She stood in front of the mirror, scrutinizing her reflection. Each polished element of her attire, the tailored blazer, the sensible heels, screamed confidence, yet the knot in her stomach betrayed her. Today was pivotal. Her dialogue with Thomas could either set her on an empowering trajectory or trap her in the corporate web she sought to escape. Arriving at the office, the usual buzz of activity struck her as muted. Colleagues exchanged brief glances as they passed. It was as if they were living in a separate realm, one where Sarah was both an outsider and a subject of speculation. Could they sense her hesitation, her fear of being crushed by the weight of corporate expectation? Breathing deeply, she steadied herself, reminding herself of the resilience forged through countless challenges, both personal and professional. As she approached Thomas's office, the soft knock on the door felt like striking the final chord in a haunting melody. "Come in," came his voice, sharp yet guarded. Entering, she found Thomas seated at a desk cluttered with meticulously stacked papers, a sharp contrast against her own sporadic notes. His demeanor was more measured than before, as though he had processed the ideas she'd proposed. "Sarah," he began, glancing up with an inscrutable expression. "Thank you for coming in. Thank you for having me," she replied, her voice steadying with focus. "I've given considerable thought to our last meeting," he said, his tone wavering between caution and intrigue. "Your points about patient narratives resonated more than I expected." A pulse of warmth pulsed through her at his acknowledgement. Here was a sliver of progress, an invitation to delve deeper into the conversation. "I believe we can align those narratives with our business goals. Stories have tremendous power to evoke empathy, and they could help us engage our stakeholders in a more meaningful way." Thomas nodded, his brow furrowing in apparent conflict. "But understanding the market and making profit-driven decisions must remain our priority. It seems you want to reshape our entire approach." In that moment, intimidation crept back in. Sarah questioned whether her ambition had overstepped the boundaries of practical business acumen. Was she really aiming to initiate change, or was she merely an idealistic novice? She exhaled, gathering her thoughts with clarity. Is it so wrong to envision a path that balances both? After all, companies driven by purpose often outperform those merely focused on profit. His gaze intensified, searching for either validation or a flaw in her logic. It was a tactical stalemate. If she showed vulnerability, she risked losing him. If she pushed too hard, she risked losing the ground she had gained. "Sarah, my responsibility is to ensure we remain viable in an ever-competitive landscape," he replied, his voice softened with sincerity. "I understand," she said, instinctively correcting her posture, leaning in slightly. "But if we ignore the human side of our business, we risk alienating those who ultimately sustain it, the patients. What good is a thriving company if it fails to impact lives positively?" For a moment, silence reigned, heavy with the weight of the conversation. In that fleeting pause, she sensed a shift within Thomas. He seemed to wrestle with something deeper than corporate policy. Compromise sparkled in the air, and she could almost feel the gears of his mind turning. "I want you to lead a pilot program," he finally replied, his voice low yet resonant. "Communicate with our patients, gather those stories, and find a way to integrate them into our strategy." If the results speak, perhaps we can shift the corporate narrative together. Her heart quickened. This was more than a mere project. It was a chance to reclaim her narrative within the organization. "I'd be honored," she said, conviction blossoming in her chest. But even as elation surged, anxiety lingered. The responsibility could either bolster her or unravel her efforts if she stumbled. How much was riding on this initiative? Could her quest for balance reveal the true value she sought to champion? As she exited his office, a sense of purpose enveloped her. But with it arose new questions. What obstacles lay ahead in merging patient narratives with corporate goals, particularly in a culture resistant to change? Sarah could feel the tension building, like the calm preceding a storm. The stakes had never been higher, and her next steps would define not just her career, but the ethos of the entire initiative. The time had come to navigate this unpredictable terrain. Would her quest for balance illuminate a transformative path, or would she find herself engulfed in the very corporate maze she sought to break free from? The following morning, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, an untouched cup of coffee cooling beside her. The sunrise cast golden light across the walls, but she barely noticed. The weight of her new responsibility pressed heavily on her chest, leading a pilot program that could redefine her company's trajectory. What had she signed up for? There was no manual for this. The endless possibilities swirled in her mind, as did the multitude of questions that haunted her. How would she gather those narratives? Who would she speak to? She could already discern the trepidation bubbling beneath her facade of confidence. Her phone buzzed, snapping her from her reverie. The message was from Jenna, her colleague and confidant. "Are you ready for this? We all believe in you." A warm smile crept onto Sarah's face momentarily, but quickly faded. Did they really? Or were they just placating her? Self-doubt gnawed at her like a relentless predator. Arriving at work, she found her colleagues immersed in their own worlds. The same muted atmosphere surrounded her, and the question swirled anew. Did they see her as she intended to be seen? Fierce? Capable? She steeled herself, departing from the usual route to her desk, to make her first stop the front office where patients arrived. "Good morning. Could I speak to some of you?" she called out cheerfully, her voice steadier than her heart raced. The muted chatter paused as a few patients looked her way, uncertainty mingled with curiosity. A tall man with silver hair leaned in. "What's this about, Sarah?" "I'm working on a project to share your experiences, what it's like to navigate our care. Your stories matter," she replied, her sincerity cutting through their initial apprehension. A woman in the back piped up. "Why would they want to hear from us?" The question pierced her. Why would they? Her breath hitched as unanswered doubts spiraled. "Because," she started, the conviction in her voice surprising her. "Your perspectives could change how we approach everything. It's a chance for your voices to be heard. We want to ensure our services truly meet your needs." A flicker of interest danced in a few eyes, and Sarah sensed the tide shifting. The gathering slowly transformed from hesitation to curiosity as patients began to engage. They shared stories, some heart-wrenching, others inspiring, that highlighted gaps in the current system. With every anecdote, she became more convinced of the potential impact. Days passed, and each interaction propelled Sarah forward, fueling her resolve. The laughter and veil of authenticity the patients provided became as critical as any business strategy. However, with every success came the grit of inevitable challenges. Thomas was pragmatic, urging her to focus on measurable outcomes. Her heart beat with concern that revealing these personal stories might not resonate with upper management's profit-centric goals. One afternoon, just as the mounting pressure settled in her chest, an unexpected knock at the door startled her. It swung open to reveal Thomas, more animated than she had previously seen. "Have you found anything significant?" he asked. The urgency in his tone displaced her swirling anxiety. Nervous yet excited, she replied, "Yes, the stories are powerful. They reflect why our work matters and the human connections we need." But even as the words exited her mouth, she feared they wouldn't move him. He folded his arms, contemplating. "I know there's depth here, Sarah, but we need to tie it to what gets results. If we get too emotional, we lose sight of the hard data. Find a way to balance both." Her pulse quickened as she recognized the tug-of-war in her heart, a kaleidoscope of ambition and responsibility. "I understand. But how do I do that without sacrificing authenticity?" she asked, voice laced with trepidation. The silence between them lingered, thick with unspoken implications. He offered no immediate answer, and it felt as if chalk scraped against a blackboard. Desperation mixed with excitement. Having earned a little credibility with her patients, could she dare advocate for their voices in the boardroom? Would her quest convince Thomas to broaden his perspective? The moment felt monumental, destined to change the entire dynamic, both for her and the company. As she exchanged glances with him, one thing lingered in the air. How much could she risk before she turned his open interest into skepticism? The stakes had never been higher, and the time for confronting her fears was upon her. Would she let her aspirations soar, or would she allow the confines of corporate structure to restrain her? The game had changed, and she could feel the tension crackling as she prepared to take the next step into the unknown. In that electrifying instant, the thought hit her like a lightning bolt. What if the truth she sought to reveal wasn't merely about stories, but about challenging the very essence of the corporate narrative itself? Glimmers of dawn's light fought through the office blinds as Sarah confronted her reflection in the glass. Her heart thudded with a mix of anticipation and dread. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day she would present her findings to the leadership team, a chance to shift the discourse surrounding patient care. Challenges loomed, and apprehension wrapped around her throat like a thin vine, taut and constricting. She reviewed her notes repeatedly, each word blurring into the next like an abstract painting. Each patient narrative was a brushstroke, vivid but chaotic. Together they formed a larger picture that she desperately needed to communicate. The authenticity of their experiences felt like fragile glass, beautiful yet perilous. Could she frame them without breaking that narrative into irreparable pieces? As the meeting room door swung open, Sarah inhaled deeply, gathering every ounce of determination. This presentation was not only about statistics. This was about stories that mattered, stories that revealed pain, resilience, and ultimately, the solutions that could bring transformation. She needed to find a way to marry this emotional depth with hard-hitting data that Thomas and the rest of the executive team would understand. When the meeting began, the air was thick with expectation. A glaring overhead light illuminated the faces around the boardroom table. Executives shifted in their seats, their postures imposing, a council of skeptics assessing her worthiness as a leader. As she made eye contact with Jenna, a comforting nod from her friend filled Sarah with a sliver of reassurance that pushed away the self-doubt tethered to her spirit. "Thank you for this opportunity. I've gathered insights from our patients that go beyond numbers," she began, her voice trembling yet steady. The room quieted. "These experiences shed light on our strengths and the areas that require urgent attention." Sarah launched into her presentation, weaving through patient stories that embodied hope and fragility. Their voices echoed in her mind as she painted imagery with vivid descriptions, igniting the room with emotion. She emphasized gaps in care and the necessity for human connection in their service model. The more she shared, the more the room echoed her passion, and she sensed a shift in energy, curiosity igniting where skepticism had been. However, before she could fully bask in that transformative moment, Thomas raised his hand. The air chilled and her heart skipped. "Sarah, this is compelling. But how can we quantify this? How do these stories translate into actionable metrics?" His brow furrowed, a familiar challenge returning. Taking a deep breath, Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. This was her critical moment. "I believe," she started, her clarity sharpening, "we can curate these narratives into a framework that links patient satisfaction metrics directly back to our strategic objectives. Each story represents an opportunity for growth that resonates beyond financials." Every word struck her like a drumbeat, each a testament to her commitment. Yet small tremors of doubt unsettled her. Could she retain her message's emotional power while satisfying the demand for data? Would they embrace her vision, or would this be the defining moment where structure devoured authenticity? The meeting devolved into a discussion, voices entwined, supporters lending credence to her argument, while others countered with cautious analytics. She fought to maintain focus amid the whirlpool of opinions, a delicate balance teetering between passion and pragmatism. Her palms grew slick as she mentally plotted her path of persuasion. Within the chaos, Sarah realized a surprising truth. Her voice held the power to reshape the foundational discourse. Rather than simply defending her work, she needed to invite them into the emotional realm she had uncovered. "Imagine," she urged, scanning the room, "if we became a leader in patient experience, not just for the profits, but for the people who trust us. This could be our moment to innovate, to set the standard, and we can do that by creating metrics that intertwine success and human experience." Her heart raced, knowing she was both stepping on solid ground and teetering at the precipice of uncertainty. The board members exchanged glances, the tension palpable as she awaited the verdict of their silence. Uncertainty nestled deep within her, but now, a flicker of something more potent began to surge. A growing determination to challenge the corporate narrative. As the meeting drew to a close, Thomas nodded, processing what she had laid before them. "Let's explore this further, but understand that this will require substantial commitment on a company-wide level," he replied, his voice weighted with gravity. Their tentative agreement ignited hope, but with it came the realization. This battle was far from over. In that transformative moment, Sarah understood the stakes had risen once more. She was no longer just a leader of a pilot program. She was an advocate for change, and every maneuver she made would ripple beyond the meeting room. What lay ahead, while promising, also unraveled a new layer of complexity. How could she inspire her colleagues to embrace this challenge, and how far would she push herself to ensure authenticity prevailed in a world that often favored profit? As Sarah reflected on the tumultuous terrain ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that real changes were about to unfold. Changes that would redefine her role and force her to confront her deepest fears. The tension escalated in her thoughts, demanding one last question. In her pursuit of truth and transformation, what boundaries was she willing to cross? Determined to carry the momentum from the meeting, Sarah spent the next few days buried in data and feedback. Her mind raced with possibilities, bridging the gap between quantitative analysis and qualitative narratives. Doubts still lingered. Would her colleagues truly rally behind this new vision? She had secured a tentative agreement, but now came the heavy lifting. One afternoon, as she sifted through patient surveys and statistical reports, a realization sparked within her. Collaboration had to be more than just a buzzword. Sarah structured a plan to involve her team in redefining patient experience metrics. It was her way of drawing them into the process, while also celebrating their contributions and expertise. Rather than being the solitary voice of change, she envisioned a chorus, about harnessing collective insights to perfect their approach. "Let's hold a brainstorming session," she proposed in the next team meeting, her voice commanding attention. "I want to hear your thoughts on how we can merge personal narratives with the analytics we track. Everyone has valuable experiences and viewpoints. Together, we can create something powerful." Receiving a mix of uncertainty and intrigue from her colleagues, Sarah felt a sense of urgency to build their confidence. This wasn't just a project for her. It was about fostering a culture that valued each input. Over the following week, as she organized workshops and collaborative discussions, she sought to break down the resistance stemming from fear of change. Stepping out of her comfort zone, she began with storytelling workshops. She invited team members to share their own encounters with patients, drawing them into a shared emotional landscape. To her surprise, the once distant executives slowly relished these heartfelt narratives. They began expressing their vulnerabilities, showcasing that beneath the polished exterior lay authentic desire for improvement. As the team exchanged ideas, Sarah realized something pivotal. A shift was taking place. Conversations moved from abstract metrics to heartfelt dialogues about their care philosophy. Each session reaffirmed that the data was, in fact, the electrocardiogram of their human interactions, and numbers alone could never capture the reverberation of a compassionate encounter. Despite this progress, shadows loomed. Thomas had expressed concern over implementation timelines and the necessary resources for such a sweeping change. During a private conversation, he reiterated the pressing nature of corporate profitability, igniting nagging doubts about whether they would follow through with this vision. "Sarah," he warned, "the next quarter is critical. We can't afford to lose sight of our main objectives. Your ideas are inspiring, but we need pragmatic approaches." His words lingered in her mind, a reminder of the unrest in balancing ambition with practicality. Sarah realized that not only was she venturing into conceptual changes, but she now also faced the task of transforming skepticism into dialogue and commitment. One evening, sitting alone in her apartment, Sarah felt crumbs of worry scatter across her mind. She flipped open her notebook, contemplating metrics and their human importance, wrestling the idea of how to maintain their authentic vision amid corporate constraints. Was she ready to uphold her dream of a transformed patient care model, guided not just by statistics but the very essence of empathy? In a moment of clarity, she drafted an outline, an invincible plan merging qualitative reflections with concrete strategies. Breaking down the new data framework would provide clarity, facilitating buy-in from the hesitant. The next day, Sarah walked into the office with renewed purpose. She couldn't lose sight of her mission. The juxtaposition of authenticity and strategic metrics was her path forward. She had the motivation, But now it was time to confront the harder questions that lay ahead. Ultimately, her resolve had to be tested. If colleagues were to embrace this vision, she must also unleash her capacity for challenge. Could she persuade the higher-ups that embracing emotional metrics constituted both ethical leadership and operational success? As she paced toward the boardroom for the next meeting, the familiar tightening sensation gripped her chest. Sarah needed to lead her team to internalize these new values, but facing Thomas and the collective skepticism loomed like an impending storm on her horizon. Caught in that space between ambition and doubt, she understood glaringly that real transformation didn't merely revolve around convincing others. It also required unwavering faith in her convictions. The stakes were higher, and with every step she took into that meeting room, she could feel the magnitude of change inching closer. What unfolded next would not only test her ability to inspire others, but also challenge her willingness to confront the harsh realities of corporate resistance head-on. Would she rise to the occasion, or would the pressure suffocate her vision? The boardroom felt cavernous, each wall echoing Sarah's heartbeat as she gathered her thoughts. Settling into her seat across from Thomas and the executives, she faced a sea of skeptical eyes, shimmering with uncertainty and unspoken doubts. The meeting was less about presenting ideas and more about negotiating faith, hers and theirs. "Thank you for coming," she began, injecting a steadiness into her voice. "Today, I want to demonstrate how our empathy-driven metrics can align with our operational goals." The numbers sprawled before her, yet she concentrated on the stories behind them. They were not mere statistics. They were the narratives shaping their care. First, she carefully laid out her findings. Our patient feedback indicates a direct correlation between emotional engagement and satisfaction scores. For every percentage increase in empathy shown by staff, we see a proportional boost in positive responses. As she flipped through the slides, her heart raced. Each statistic became a testament to potential change, a compelling case that sought to bridge the heart and the ledger. As she spoke, however, a flicker of skepticism danced in Thomas's eyes. "But how do we ensure that these new metrics won't compromise our profitability?" His challenge hung heavy in the air, the question expected yet visceral. "Empathy doesn't conflict with profitability," she replied, steeling herself. "In fact, studies show that organizations demonstrating higher employee and patient satisfaction see lower turnover, reduced burnout, and even improved financial outcomes." The room fell silent, but she could sense the fracture in their resolve. Thomas's face betrayed a mix of concern and curiosity, a crack in his rigid demeanor that offered a glimmer of hope. She pressed further, her passion fueling her momentum. She illustrated how they could monitor these emotional metrics alongside traditional performance indicators, creating a balanced approach that retained a clear focus on their corporate objectives. "Imagine if we equipped our staff with training to enhance their emotional intelligence," she proposed next, a thought crystallizing in her mind. "Not only will this empower them, but it can redefine our patient relationships. Giving employees tools to be more attuned to patient needs could lead to transformative experiences that resonate beyond a survey score." Her colleagues shifted uncomfortably, grappling with the unfamiliar interplay of emotion and metrics. The hesitation mirrored her own internal conflict. She was advocating for a paradigm shift that challenged years of established practices. It wasn't merely about winning them over. It was about cultivating an environment where empathy was not an afterthought but integral. Just as she began to feel her resolve waver, a voice emerged from the back of the room. "But how do we quantify the successes of emotional training?" It was Rebecca, someone Sarah had always considered an ally. Her question cut through the tension, met initially with eye rolls, but then a notable shift softened the atmosphere. Sarah seized the opening. "We can establish specific, tangible goals for these trainings, tracking improvements in patient satisfaction and employee engagement post-implementation. This integration would be our bridge, linking compassion with data." She looked around, gauging reactions. The unease was still present, but the flickering doubt seemed to glow with speculative interest. With every response igniting renewed energy in her words, Sarah felt like she was building something monumental. As she delved deeper into her vision, articulating clear steps toward transitioning the ethos of care, she caught snippets of nods amongst the executives. Their resistance wavered, replaced with a cautious curiosity. However, Thomas's brows furrowed deeply. Will these efforts truly translate into a financial benefit? That question clawed at Sarah. She could feel her confidence trembling. This was the crucible moment she hadn't fully prepared for, the confrontation with not just corporate skepticism, but also her resolve to stand firm in her beliefs. "I believe so," she asserted, a spark driving her voice stronger. Research indicates a direct link, but it's more than just numbers. It's about creating a culture we can be proud of, one where patient care is interwoven with our operational success. The room was still, sprawling with the weight of possibility and trepidation. What she had hoped would be a non-confrontational presentation transformed into an intense negotiation of ideals, each passing second stretching under the pressure of forthcoming judgment. As silence enveloped them, Sarah continued to recognize the threads of advocacy connecting her to her colleagues. The urgency to convey her vision, to show the practical implications of emotional practices, welled within her. Failure loomed, a haunting specter in the backdrop, but so did an exciting opportunity to pivot their trajectory. Would they see the clarity in her convictions, or would lingering doubts cast her vision aside? The moment of reckoning took shape, built on fragile and uncertain foundations, with everyone around her weighing their options on this precipice of change. What would she discover about her own capacity to influence the course of her team's direction? Uncertainties loomed, but the presence of potential change lingered in the air. As the meeting drew to a close, Sarah could feel the intensity building within her. The air buzzed with the unvoiced opinions of her colleagues, and the weight of her proposition hung heavily in the balance. She had come so far, transcending personal doubt, to advocate not just for patient care, but for a fundamental shift in her company's approach. But now, she stood at a crossroads. Would the audacity to intertwine compassion with strategy resonate, or would she find herself backing down from the very ideals she sought to champion? After what felt like an eternity, Thomas finally broke the silence. "I have to admit, Sarah, your perspective is intriguing. It's a viewpoint I hadn't fully considered. But action requires a solid foundation in data. Can you ensure we will see tangible growth if we take this leap?" "Absolutely," Sarah replied with renewed conviction. "If we're focused on long-term success, investing in our employees' emotional capabilities will give us a competitive advantage, improve patient loyalty, and reduce turnover. It's not merely about financial metrics, it's about creating a legacy." She could see glimmers of understanding flickering among the executives. After months of struggles, of asserting herself, of facing internal doubts, and questioning the legitimacy of her voice, this was a critical moment of realization. They were potentially on the threshold of something profoundly transformative. "Let's outline a pilot program," Sarah suggested, her heart racing. "We can monitor impacts on patient satisfaction, employee engagement, and correlate these with our existing metrics." A nod of agreement from Jenna validated her effort, igniting a spark across the table. Encouraged, Sarah turned her eyes to each member of leadership, gauging the shift from skepticism to intrigue. The air felt lighter, the moment shimmered with success. They might actually explore her vision further. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah capitalized on this newfound momentum. The initial pilot programs were launched, and slowly she watched as the culture began to morph around her. Staff started engaging more openly in discussions, sharing patient stories that authentically highlighted the core of their work. In this warm atmosphere, her own confidence flourished. As metrics began to illustrate clear links between higher employee satisfaction and improved patient outcomes, external evaluations confirmed the effectiveness of the initiative. Press coverage praised the empathy-driven framework Sarah had championed. For the first time, her colleagues embraced the narrative she had envisioned, the metrics reflecting the heart of their endeavor. Finally, months later, Sarah stood before a crowd at a conference. Her initiative had gained recognition beyond the company, garnering accolades for its innovative approach to patient care. Each presenting moment solidified her voice as an essential contributor to the healthcare industry. "Empathy should be at the center of our business," she declared, projecting a confidence that had been forged in the fires of uncertainty. "Because only by addressing the human side of healthcare can we achieve sustainable success." Gratification coursed through her as the applause reverberated around her. Here she was, validated in not just her professional objectives, but in her personal journey of reclaiming her voice. As she left the stage, her heart swelled with pride. She had not only accomplished what she set out to do, but she had redefined her identity, solidifying her position as a leader in her field. The fear of failure that had once paralyzed her was now a distant memory. Sarah had emerged victorious, not because she partnered with a billionaire or navigated a corporate maze, but because she had faced down her doubts and fought for an authentic mission. A full-circle moment washed over her as she recalled her initial despair from losing her job as a nurse. What felt like the end at one moment had ultimately become a new beginning. The strength she now possessed would serve her through whatever challenges lay ahead. This was not just a resolution. It was an awakening. And now, Sarah was ready to embrace whatever came next. You need to subscribe now to catch the next chapter in transformative journeys. Leave a like now. To feed the algorithm, your support fuels our passion. Comment below with your thoughts and theories on Sarah's incredible journey. Share this video with at least 5 friends who should witness this inspiring transformation. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. Together, we can uplift personal overcoming stories.